Needed to stop playing, so I said, I guess it's time for me to be a leader. Finished here. Okay, so I'm John Driesman, the lay leader today. We welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Pottstown. We're a liberal spiritual community. Therefore, we welcome people, whether you are gay, transgender, queer, black, white, whether your background has been in religion, whether you are Catholic, Presbyterian, Episcopal, Lutheran, Jewish, Islam, we don't really care. We hope you just come here to be with us, to join with us in unity as we all follow our own spiritual pathways and learn what we need to learn about how we will best deal with religion. We're also thrilled that probably Cheryl is with us as we have an interlude between her educational blocks, and we now have her trained fingers. I joke with her that I tried to pick the hymns that would be the most challenging. But actually I tried, but since I don't know how to read music, I really couldn't tell the amount of notes there were, and see, that's a lot of notes. I think we brought it home, that was at least one that we could use and to your fingers. So first and foremost, if we have any announcements for the benefit of the congregation, please come to the mic, and I have turned it on instead of the buzzing. So please come up and tell us what you have to say.
Good morning, I'm Irene, and I have two things. First, we will be having a sharing circle today, following directly after the service. So I invite all of you to come here. We'll be sharing, whatever comes up for us, okay? And I welcome all of you to join us. You of course are welcome to get some coffee and some food, and right after that, you can head on here and we'll make a circle here for sharing. Okay, and the second thing, yesterday we had an amazing cooking demonstration by Chef Cliff. We have a couple people here who also joined us yesterday, and I'm happy to say it was half people of this congregation and half people from Cliff's work. So it was really nice showing here. I know my daughter showed up with me, and it was just an amazing experience. So thank you so much, Chef Cliff. I think I've had enough chocolate to last me a lifetime, but we all know it's not true. We all know it's not true. So I'll be back to your chocolate in a couple of days. So thank you very much.
Speaking as a physician, we know that chocolate does have health benefits, especially dark chocolate.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Cliff, and the demonstration yesterday was lots of fun for everyone. I enjoyed doing it. It was great that we raised money for the church, and I got to tell a bunch of old stories, and everyone had a great time. So the next one I think is going to be on souffles and really how easy and foolproof they are. And delicious. Good.
Hi, I'm Miranda, and I just probably most of you know this, all of you probably know. On New Year's Day, we'll have a labyrinth walk here in the sanctuary. It will begin at 12 noon, and we especially welcome children between 12 noon and 1, so that they can kind of decide what they want to do in the labyrinth. And then from 1 until 4 is for adults. And the last walker usually is admitted around 3:40 because a typical walk on the labyrinth is about 20 minutes long. I'll be referring to the labyrinth somewhat on the Sunday before New Year's Day. That's, I think, the 29th, just a few days before that. So it will be sort of a pair of opportunities, subject-wise. Sure.
I'm Laurie. These are the dolls that we donate to Health Partners International of Canada, knitted by members. They are passed to children by medical personnel and service people who come in contact with children in war-torn and very challenged communities around the world. So just keep knitting. And next Sunday after potluck lunch, I'm always here if anybody wants to learn to knit or if anybody wants to knit together. Just show up and I'll have some yarn and needles if you would like to learn and to contribute. I just wanted to say too that we sent, it'll be 50, I'm gonna mail these off. That'll be about 50 we sent. It's not a huge number, but there might be 50 children out there that have been comforted. So we'll just keep going. And I'm gonna post a sign out there that shows the number as it changes over time. Thank you.
Morning, I'm Valerie. The craft fair raffle drawing will be next week during the potluck or after all, give people time to eat. I'm gonna be recruiting the kids to do the drawing from the jars. I think it's gonna be really a lot of fun. You still can buy tickets today or next week, even if you haven't bought tickets yet, or if you want to increase your chances of getting that special something that you've got your eye on. I will have the tickets today and next week, and then we'll do the drawing.
Thank you for all the announcements. They speak to our social justice element of our faith and living it out. If we have someone who is willing to light the chalice. Listen. This is from the Passover Haggadah, because of course, that's a very important lighting experience. May the light we now kindle inspire us to use our powers to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to bless and not to curse, to serve you, spirit of freedom. How to do this. So I will hit the chime. That's a time to hopefully focus us into this facility, into the sanctuary with people that we know and care for. The time to look at anything you have that makes noise, such as a phone, such as I put one on silent, or a pager, so you can be uninterrupted during the course of the service. Their opening words are 441. It is a joint reading. I read the stuff that's not italics, and you read the stuff that is italics if you are willing to do so. I remain seated. I think we put the glasses on for this one. So to worship. To worship is to stand in awe under a heaven of stars, before a flower, a leaf in sunlight, or a grain of sand. To worship is to work with dedication and with skill. It is to pause from work, listen to a strain of music. Worship is a loneliness seeking communion. It is a thirsty land crying out for rain. Worship is a mystery within us, reaching out to the mystery beyond. Thank you all for participating. It is now time for the first. I kind of chose 3 hymns, knowing we had a field pianist today as opposed to 2. Hopefully we'll get through them all. If not, we'll cut one out. So the opening hymn is 189, Light of Ages and of Nations. And please stand as you are willing and able. friend Cheryl provides me with her sermon hymn. We don't talk about it, but I tried to find readings that I think will mesh well with whatever she will say. Time will tell. So the talk is about cynicism, and I have two readings. The first one will talk about cynicism as it was initially coming from the Greeks, the Stoics and so forth. And the second will speak to cynicism as we understand that concept today. So hopefully this will not be boring, but a little bit of capacity. Cynicism is a school of thought in ancient Greek philosophy originating in the classical period and extending into the Hellenistic and Roman imperial periods. According to cynicism, people are reasoning animals, and the purpose of life and the way to gain happiness is to achieve virtue in agreement with nature, following one's sense of reason by living simply and shamelessly free from social constraints. The Cynics rejected all conventional desires for wealth, power, glory, social recognition, conformity, and worldly possessions, and even flouted such conventions openly and in public. The first philosopher to outline these themes was Antisthenes, who had been a pupil of Socrates in the late 400s BC. He was followed by Diogenes, who lived in a ceramic jar in the streets of Athens. I'm not sure any of us want to live in ceramic jars. He took cynicism to its logical extremes with his famous public demonstrations of nonconformity, coming to be seen as the archetypical Cynic philosopher. He was followed by Crates of Thebes, who gave away a large fortune so he could live a life of Cynic poverty in Athens. He goes on to say how he diminished thereafter and was kind of mimicked by the ascetic lives in early Christianity. I'll leave it there for right now. We'll pick that up with the more modern comment of cynicism and cynical ethics in reading number 2. So it is now a time for all ages, and anyone who is young in body or age or spirit should feel free to come to the front. I'm not sure if anyone prepared anything.
No, I wasn't asked to.
Okay. Then I'm not sure I'm going to go for it because this is a pretty dense topic. So we'll leave it at that, and we will have time thereafter to have a little conversation after Reverend Cheryl's sermon. So I think with that being said, without having a time down here, we can sing our children to their classes, which is number 413, which I think we all know well. Okay. So it is now time for one of the 3 items that we talk so much about in our fellowship, which is time, talent, and treasure. This is a time which we talk about treasure, which is really your willingness to financially support our fellowship in its efforts. We, again, run on the money that keeps everything going, pays our bills, and helps us sustain our mission in the greater Pottstown area of liberal religion and social justice. So please, as you're able, feel free to contribute to the fellowship. Thank you for contributing what you felt you were able to do. There's no requirement. I will tell you that when I first came to my first UU service back and fellowship back in 1992, having come from the Jewish faith, I was very surprised because in the Jewish faith, things are not left to chance. You pay dues to the temple, sometimes rather high dues to the temple, and you pay for everything else you do, and they have a budget, and that's how they meet the budget. But when it came to a non-Judaic religious process, I So this is kind of cool. People give what they can, your budget is what it has to be. And that seems like a better concept because people support with their hearts and souls, not because of a requirement. Okay, our second hymn, if you're able to stand, as you're able and willing, this is one of my favorite ones. This is my song. It's set to Sibelius' Finlandia, and number 159. So please stand as you're willing and able. Okay, so this is my second reading about cynicism. I have several here I made since we have some time to go through both of them here. And this is the more modern view of cynicism as I kind of found it online. So we'll do one part here. Foremost, for understanding the Cynic conception of ethics is that virtue is a life lived in accord with nature. Nature offers a clear indication of how to live a good life, which is characterized by reason, self-sufficiency, and freedom. It doesn't say here, but I think of Thoreau. Social conventions, however, can hinder the good life by compromising freedom and setting up a code of conduct that is opposed to nature and reason. Conventions are not inherently bad. However, for the Cynic, conventions are often absurd and worthy of ridicule. Cynics deride attention paid to the Olympics, the big thieves who run the temples and are seen carrying away with the little thieves who steal from them, politicians as well as philosophers who attend their courts, fashion, and prayers for such things as fame and fortune. I think we can make some allusions to that commentary with what's happening currently. Only once that one has freed oneself from the strictures that impede an ethical life can one be said to be truly free. As such, the Cynics advocate ascesis, or practice over theory, to remain free from convention, promote self-sufficiency, and live in accord with nature. Such ascesis leads the Cynic to live in poverty, embrace hardship and toil, permits the Cynic to speak freely about the silly and often vicious way of life lived by his or her contemporaries. So I'm going to go on to the second one here, which I think also speaks to this as well. This is a bit shorter. Cynicism is naturally characterized by a general distrust of the motives of others. A Cynic may have a general lack of faith or hope in people motivated by ambition, desire, greed, gratification, materialism, goals, and opinions that a Cynic perceives as vain, unattainable, ultimately meaningless. The term originally derives from the ancient Greek philosophers, the Cynics, who rejected conventional goals of wealth, power, and honor. They practiced shameless nonconformity with social norms in religion, manners, housing, dress, or decency, instead advocating the pursuit of virtue in accordance with a simple and natural way of life. I'm going to make a quick comment here. Cynicism is often confused with pessimism or nihilism, perhaps due to their shared association with a lack of faith in humanity. The difference among the three is that cynicism is a distrust by prudence, while due to a sense of defeatism, pessimism is distrust of potential success. Nihilism, on its part, is a general distrust cast upon the belief that anything in life, including life itself, has any valuable meaning. I'm not sure if that's a happy lead-in to Reverend Cheryl's sermon. It's based upon a book that she has read, upon which we'll be commenting. So Reverend Cheryl Meinschein has been here before. She's a retired, semi-retired, partially retired Lutheran minister, doing other things such as charitable work as a paralegal. It's her new profession or life. All of her talks have been thought-provoking. Therefore, I will notice that we have her talk and time for discussion after that before we get into our closing hymn. And generally, when Reverend Cheryl has talked to us, she does provoke a reasonable amount of commentary after the fact. So, Reverend Cheryl.
Right. Back in October, Lisa emailed me that she had been hearing about a book by Jamil Zaki on cynicism, how not to become a victim of it and how to find kindness underneath it. And I thought this would be a great focus for us post-election and moving toward the end of one year and the beginning of another. The book is actually entitled Hope for Cynics, The Surprising Science of Human Goodness. So here we go. First, an introduction to Jamil Zaki. He's a professor of psychology at Stanford University. He's the director of the Stanford Social Neuroscience Lab and the author of two books, one Hope for Cynics and the other The War for Kindness. And if you would like a short version of his perspective, he's done 2 TED Talks, which sum it up in 15 minutes. TED Talks are a great thing if you haven't found them yet. At any rate, we need a definition of cynicism to get started. And the definition that Zaki uses is closer to the last thing that you read. He defines it simply as a lack of faith in other people, which is kind of the most modern, I think, definition. And cynicism is on the rise. In 1972, 50% of Americans surveyed agreed that most people can be trusted. Imagine that. In 1972, half said most people can be trusted. Would you guess which way it went? Yeah. By 2018, only a third felt that way. And it's not only an American problem. An international survey conducted in 2022 found that in 24 of 28 countries, most people said their tendency is to distrust others. So cynicism is on the rise. And it's not good for us. Cynical adolescents are more likely than non-cynics to become depressed college students. And cynical college students are more likely to drink heavily and divorce by middle age. Non-cynics tend to earn more money steadily over their careers, but cynics tend to flatten. Cynics are also more likely to suffer heartbreak and heart disease. In one study, about 2,000 men filled out a survey which indicated that if they had a cynical perspective on life, 9 years later, 177 of those surveyed had died, and cynics were twice as likely as non-cynics to be among the dearly departed. When a world values survey asked people around the globe if they agreed that most people could be trusted, high trust communities were physically healthier and more tolerant of difference. They donated more to charity, they were more civically engaged, and they were less likely to die by suicide. When economists measured trust in 41 nations, as well as their GDP, high trust nations grew their wealth, low trust countries while stagnated or declined. So cynicism is not good for us individually or as a body. So what I'd like to do this morning is to understand some of the causes of cynicism and then come up with a treatment plan, especially in ourselves. So let's get started in learning something about what causes cynicism or lack of trust in others. Turns out, and this should be no surprise, it has a lot to do with how we're raised. Psychological studies have shown that most people decide in their first year of life whether or not they can trust the world. When children that young learn they can trust their caregivers, the world becomes a safe place full of possibilities. Children who don't learn that are more likely to distrust lovers, friends, strangers, and institutions. And between 1988 and 2011, that sense of security has decreased in American children by about 8%. I'm surprised that figure isn't higher. Cynicism can be self-protective. The well-known social researcher George Carlin once said, "Scratch a cynic and you'll find a disappointed idealist." And I think there's some truth to that. A disappointed idealist can be someone who's less likely to trust in the future to avoid being hurt again. Zaki goes on to talk about some pre-existing conditions that can lead to an increase in cynicism. And the first is economic inequality. He notes that poor people have a good reason to suspect a culture that leaves them, these days literally, out in the cold. Yet even those we would define as winners are on edge, believing that their advantages could be snatched away at any time. And there are plenty of people who would like to do that because rivals are all around. The second pre-existing condition Zaki mentions is abuse by those in the power structure, whether that be political systems, corporate systems, or judicial systems. It's not hard to become more cynical about them. So in the second part of the book, the author offers several treatment options to help us on a personal level if you find you're tending more towards cynicism. One, unplug from any media that tends to foster competition or to make you feel less than another. Next, practice savoring. Take time to slow down and appreciate human goodness and good things in the world around us, including chocolate, especially dark. Chocolate. Point out the positives, especially to our children. Learn to trust locally. And this is one that I suspected was true, and studies show that it is. A survey of 23,000 people across 21 countries found that only 30% believe that most people can be trusted. But if you change the question and ask about people in their local village or community, it went up to 65%. That most people in their own community or area trusted one another. And the difference was even more striking in nations or countries that reported as more cynical. Next, watch out for negativity bias, which means that people pay more attention to bad things than good. Does that surprise you? No. Although this may make sense evolutionarily, it's not an accurate reflection of the world. Most of us would say, without thinking about it, that cooperation has gone down over the years. But in a study of 60,000 people between 1956 and 2017, people cooperated 9% more over time, not less. When we underestimate people's virtues, it gets even worse if we gossip about them. Imagine that. Bad behavior and talking about it is what grabs our attention. Instead, the author suggests we move to something he calls positive deviant news, such as the online magazine Reasons to Be Cheerful. Imagine that. These stories are known as solution journalism and focus on reasons to hope. Next, he recommends take a risk on trust. When people know they are trusted, they are more productive and trust in turn. This does not mean be stupid. Take small steps to start. And for more information about how this might work in a business setting, I'd recommend Adam Grant's book, Give and Take. He's a business psychologist at the Wharton School who does not agree with the saying, good guys finish last. Rethink what you've learned about evolutionary benefits. Survival of the fittest, and most self-centered, can be outdone by the benefits of cooperation, which would be the benefits of a pack. Watch out for loneliness and isolation, which can reflect an underlying cynicism or the idea that others do not want or need us. Volunteer, especially for a cause that matters to you. In a recent study of healthcare workers, the only factor that decreased cynicism was compassion toward others. Learn how to consider the perspective of others and take the risk of a conversation with a stranger leading off ramps for them to leave the conversation if it starts to feel uncomfortable. My favorite part of the book is that Zaki refers to the need to cultivate something he calls hopeful skepticism, where skepticism is defined as being a lack of faith in our own assumptions, that what we believe may not necessarily be true. And he recommends moving toward an open-mindedness to seeing something that we didn't expect, the questioning of old information and the hunger for new. In the words of Ronald Reagan, trust but verify. Look at the data that's out there. And then after these general comments, the author moved on to politics, particularly American politics. He urged us to watch out for tribal cynicism, the people that believe on the other side of the argument, especially political ones, are evil, stupid, or both. And I'd love to read you the whole chapter about politics, given our present time, but I won't. It turns out that both Democrats and Republicans are imagine that their rivals are more extreme than they are, called false polarization. For example, a 2021 survey of more than 80,000 people identified nearly 150 issues that Republicans and Democrats agree on. Several of them were endorsed by more than 2/3 of each party, but you wouldn't know that from listening to our own news media or even on bad days to ourselves. Here's another survey. In 2020, researchers asked 1,500 people if they would support violence to advance their group's cause. 5% of Democrats and 8% of Republicans said they would. But each group thought that more than 30% of the other side supported violence, dreaming up rivals that were 4 times more bloodthirsty than the real thing. And yet, even though Democrats, 80% of Republicans and Democrats say polarization is a major problem for our country and would prefer more cooperation, there is a growing sense, especially when our side loses, that indeed all is lost and democracy is over. And the problem with this kind of thinking is that it kills our sense of possibility and any sense of hopefulness. And yet, as the political chapter ended, the author found himself wondering if hopefulness and the need for dialogue, especially regarding politics, was only what he called a psychological sedative, calming us when we should be agitated. That was interesting. I have to think some more. The last portion of the book talked about the need to talk about decreasing cynicism on a national or global level, and he started with a decrease among income inequality. Earlier in the book, he talked about how cynicism increases in the poor when they see themselves as powerless, especially in terms of income. He talks about the stereotype of a welfare queen, a stand-in for all those who are trying to rig the system and fritter away the money they do receive. And the author made the point that when you look at the data on welfare fraud, the numbers of folks who do that are actually very small. But lots of rules and regs have been set up to address the problem of fraud, rules and regs that really aren't necessary and makes accessing funds difficult for those who need them. And Zaki would advise, given the data, that we should be less cynical about the poor, increase trust, and help them, which would in turn decrease their cynicism about the system. He also talked about the necessity for hope for any change in addressing social issues. He remarks that cynics look at society with the diagnosis that something is wrong, and they find the chance of change minimal. To quote him, cynics whisper that our government is abusive because every government is. That the politician is corrupt because they all are. So why bother? So the challenge for us is to be hopeful about the possibility of change, which can be a challenge. Now, how does that happen? Surveyors found that for people in dozens of nations in 2022, there were two emotional forces that drive action. The first is a righteous anger at injustice. And the second is when advocates experience, I'm not even going to say it right, efficacy, which is a sense that they can do something about it. And you need both. You need the anger and the sense that you can make a difference to bring about the possibility of change. It was interesting to me that one of the examples Zaki gave of a change agent was Loretta Ross, who advocates for reproductive rights and racial justice. And one of the strategies she recommended was that rather than calling somebody out for their behavior, to do something she calls calling in. Calling in names the harm that someone does, but also names their capacity to change and grow. Calling out or publicly shaming people for their behavior can increase the chances that the individual you're trying to get to change is going to double down and become even more resistant. Her version of social change is fueled by hopeful skepticism and belief in the goodness of most people. Zaki went on to talk about what he calls doomerism, where we are exhausted by the enormity of the problem, of the upcoming doom, which can breed fatalism and lack of hope. And he specifically addressed climate change. He started with a cynical assumption that most people don't care very much about the planet. However, surveys indicate that 65% of those surveyed desire climate reform. So we need to check our assumptions, because hopelessness can keep us from seeking the solutions that we desperately need. Zaki concludes that billions of us are taught that life is a battle where winners take all and losers are everywhere. Anyone who exhibits trust and hope is mocked as naive, but the author recommends that we stay skeptical, questioning our assumptions, and avoid knee-jerk assumptions about people. He urges us to remember that the media can warp our view of one another and asks us to check our assumptions about each other with better data. My favorite part of the book was a short quote at the beginning from Rebecca Solnit, who is a writer, a historian, and an activist. And she said, "Hope is not a lottery ticket you can sit on the sofa and clutch, feeling lucky. It is an axe you break down doors with in an emergency." In spite of a periodically creeping cynicism, I plan on moving forward in hope. Thank you. Comments?
I'll make the first comment. My mother was a relatively negative woman, especially if some events took place in the family. She used to have the view that everyone's against you. And that was kind of what, her sour view of life. And I could have married better, which was unfortunate for my father, and a lot of things of that sort. But the odd thing is she passed away at 90, having a bad aortic valve, and it was before we had the aortic catheter treatments, which would have been great for her, but she was too frail at 88 when we found the problem to undergo major surgery. So take that as you will. She was definitely a cynic, looking at life, and regardless of that, somehow she persevered. It had its effect on me, I would say. I'm not sure I had it when I was a kid, but it was a later event of life that I kind of had to deal with. My father was the exact opposite. He was a very optimistic and cheerful and loving and outgoing person. So that's my background from cynicism and different parenting.
Thanks, John. Before I make my comment, I want to extend Cheryl's invitation for all of us to give her topics to discuss. She is very interested in following up on things that we would like to hear about. And so just let me know, email me or something, I'll pass it on to Cheryl. And I appreciate that you chose this topic.
Yeah, the hardest part for me is coming up with interesting topics. And once you tell me what it is, I'm like, oh my God. So feel free, if there's something, education, science, whatever.
And that is our first speaker who has ever made that general invitation, so keep that in mind. First of all, about trust, I want to say that this group is a group that I trust infinitely. And it's one of the things that has kept me coming to UUFP all these years, because everyone shares so willingly and so trustingly. I want to share a little experience. Now, I guess it was a big experience, and I'm glad you mentioned this, Cheryl. I can remember as an infant, before walking, I can remember being loved and hugged by my parents as an infant who was still laying in crib. And I think that that has given me a ton of strength. And I'm glad you mentioned these things, because I think I'm going to just go back there emotionally when I feel upset and do that. And I wish I could just share with everybody that that kind of love and acceptance just goes a long way.
Yeah, and I think you learn from your parent. I don't know what your own experience has been, but when I was a kid, there was a wooded field at the end of the road, and we would go down there and disappear for hours on our own. And as long as we were home at 5:30 for dinner, it was fine. I'm not sure parents now feel that same kind of comfort in having their kids, no. Whether that's due to the kids or the state of the world, I'm not sure, but
Just in response to what was just said, not to the topic in general, but I feel comfortable here letting my kids go play in the woods that are out back. Although I do have to check for ticks every time. But I'm not comfortable letting my kids wander around our neighborhood, even though we live in a basically close development with very little traffic. But it's like, if you go around the bend and I can't see you, like I have no idea where you are, and I have no idea what you're doing, that freaks me out. And my boys don't have phones yet. So, yeah, I think I'm in this place now as a parent where like, I don't, like if I can't contact you, if you don't have a phone or something, like my oldest has a phone now, but I'm not comfortable with them being in a place where I don't know where it is and I don't know how to reach them.
yeah, and I'd be curious, this is probably talk for another time, but why is that?
I think, yeah, ultimately because we have lost that trust. I mean, I don't think if you really, like, do I really think they're gonna get like kidnapped or something? No, not. But I just have no way of knowing.
But something's in the world that's changed that sense.
Yeah.
I think, because you're not the only person who feels that way.
We'll go with you first.
Well, did the other person who had any other kind of response to that?
Oh, I did, yeah.
Okay, if it's more topical, then I'll wait.
Well, I was just gonna say in relationship to the parenting thing, there's a lot of shame around like not keeping a close eye on your children and all these things in the news about parents being arrested because their child was walking to the park by themselves, you know, things like that. So I feel like there's a lot of that now that there wasn't before. That might be contributing to the you're here but not there, because this is a loving and trusting community. You're probably gonna be keeping an eye out, you know, whereas in the neighborhood, people might be like, well, where's mom? You know what I mean? I don't know.
This was very appropriate topic for me because I believe I am a cynic. And I actually had never thought of it with the original definition that John shared. But going with today's definition, I work in a job where I am just constantly devastated. And just by, so it's legal services. So the only people who qualify for our legal help are people who are living at 150% of the federal poverty line or below. And I handle eviction. So I feel, although before my job, I used to be you know, giving other people the benefit of the doubt, pretty trusting about, even if it seems like, you know, they're trying to, like, you never know what somebody's motivation is, and you're probably reading it wrong. They're probably trying to do good or, but now, unfortunately, since I spend 40 hours a week doing this work, I find it very difficult to avoid, I don't remember the term that you used, but doomism? Yes, I mean, these people don't have enough income to live in this county. The landlord-tenant laws are not protective enough. They are going to lose their housing, and they are going to lose their housing subsidy. And that's just how I think now, so it's very sad, and I'm sharing that.
Yeah, I do some of that too, and it's hard to remain hopeful in that situation.
Don't whack me in the eye. I was just sitting here and thinking about the kids, and I would love to know what the crime statistics are on children and getting the things that happen versus going back, say, 100 years. Leopold and Loeb were 1924. And I was nearly snatched off the street when I was 12. And so it makes me wonder if things are really worse now, or we just hear about it more because we're so connected to everybody and what's going on. And that's just had me thinking. And then I do remember in my little community, the kids run around all over the place. At least they really used to. The kids would be, and there would be mothers coming by, hey, have you seen so-and-so? Well, I think he was over there a while ago, or nope, okay, good luck. And then that kid would wander by later and say, go home, your mother's looking for you. You know, so, I mean, it's just a question. I really do wish we had the stats. Because I don't know if things are any worse, because I hear the same stories going back 40, 50, 60, 100 years.
Good job, man.
So this is a bit of a shift from the kid safety thing, but I would like to respond to something you mentioned in your talk earlier, where you were saying that we tend to think of the other political side as being more radical than they actually are. My feeling on that is like, so I have a friend in my like mom sort of play group who's from Finland, and she was talking to me about American left and right compared to like European left and right, and how generally our mainstream Democrats are very, very centrist, even slightly conservative, compared to the liberal progressive parties in Europe. And our right is very far right compared to the politics where she's from. And it's really hard for me to try and give conservatives in our country these days the benefit of the doubt as far as, oh, they're not that radical. I mean, when I listen to the YouTube, I don't go to them because I don't think I can handle it, but I've watched the school board meetings. And the things that people say when they get up to, like, the rhetoric is extremely radicalized on the conservative side, and it's scary. And I know that that's a minority. I know that like Moms for Liberty does not represent all conservatives, but they are radical. I mean, that's not an exaggeration. And it's really hard these days to listen to the Fox News and whatnot calling us like radical leftists, when I know that compared to like other parts of the world, our liberals are very, very moderate. So it's frustrating to have that really tossed at us and to be told, oh, both sides think the other side is too radical. It feels a little disingenuous.
Oh. This was the birthday present, and I love it.
That's my meeting, pretty cooler.
I'm Judy. I guess you probably all know that I have a huge amount of friends overseas. And I totally echo what you said, that my half my family in Denmark are conservative, half are liberal. But every conservative over there is, the abortion issue has been totally solved. It is not going anywhere. They all believe that the woman has the right to choose. It's not an issue like it is here, and many other subsidies there. But the thing when you talked, Valerie, was it was probably 15-20 years ago, and I read this article in Time magazine about the shifting political opinions. And they took a look at Richard Nixon's positions, who we all know his problems, but he also was the one that created the EPA. And they took his positions, and then I'm pretty sure it was George Bush, Shrub, that the position of the party there. And Richard Nixon at that point would have been a conservative Democrat if he held the exact same political opinions that he had in 1974. We have just shifted so far to the right, and I'll be honest, I'm just totally dismayed with politics. I definitely am a cynic, and I'm struggling with family members that voted for such a person, two people at the top of the ticket who have zero values that I was taught as a child. So I struggle with that.
Yeah, I think the challenge is how do we not lose our sense of being able to make a difference? Because that's the temptation, to say there's nothing I can do and just shut down. And that's, some people have chosen that for their own mental health or for whatever reason. But I think the challenge is still out there.
I'll make a comment to echo Kelly's comment. So I'm a physician, she's an attorney. We both went into our professions with a great deal of hope and positivity. I'm sure we were gonna go out and help the world. And, my first, my certifications in family practice, family medicine, that was my first 27 years. For various reasons, I went into occupational medicine in 2007. And unfortunately, it has affected my view of people I see. Because much like with Kelly, people come in, the majority are there because they want to be healed. They've injured themselves at work, aside from examinations for a job, physical. The injured people generally want to get better. But you have the minority who are kind of scamming the system and require a great deal of emotional fortitude to deal with them without calling them a liar, which you can't do legally. Spending money to get tests to prove what is real, what's not real. And so I will echo the fact that, one can go into a line of work with all the best desires, but based upon your internal psyche, and others have no issue with it, you have to deal with people that are not being honest players. But you want to have compassion and want to keep your compassion that made you into the practitioner or lawyer or person that you were. And it does pose issues, I'm sure, for anyone in any field who's dealing with people who are less than forthright.
Yes, and we were just saying it's important to keep the mindset that you can make a difference. Your actions can make a difference. And in my experience at work, my actions do make a difference, but I continue to have devastating doom because it's such a small difference when you look at all the people who need help with their housing. It's wonderful to help 4 or 5. But then again, those 4 or 5, because of the way the system is designed here, are going to be in the same situation next year or a couple years after that. So it continues to feel overwhelming, even though I do believe that I can make a difference.
Time for one more perhaps, if not, we can continue the conversation in the caring group afterwards or during coffee hour. So. Thank you all for your comments. Oh, one more, okay, that's the ultimate, an ultimate comment.
Sorry, this isn't actually to continue the conversation, just briefly, I wanted to make a book recommendation. There's a book called Humankind, A Hopeful History. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Yeah, by, might be saying this wrong, Rutger Bregman. It is translated, the original, it's not in English, but I read it last year and it was probably the single most impactful book for me that I've ever read as far as how I perceive our species. And it's something that I've been trying to draw on since the election to remind myself, humankind, one word. But he goes into the history of sociology and psychology and like just all of this evidence that humans are actually not terrible. So it's a really good read.
See, you ever see it up there? No.
Oh, I had a comment about the futility feeling. And I felt that a lot recently, and I keep trying to remember to have faith and that you don't, it's a giant iceberg shift. You don't know what your little nudge is gonna nudge, is gonna nudge, is gonna nudge. So, the faith, that combat sense.
Hang on.
This one say real quick, this 10-year-old said, he just said humans are terrible.
In my devotions yesterday, the quote was, do what you can with the gifts from God that you have and leave the rest to God, but tell God to get moving.
Okay, well, you know, as always, Cheryl provides a sermon, and I always leave time afterwards since I'm the leader. And as always, we have a lot of great and fruitful conversation. So. On a more optimistic and hopeful note, in the teal hymnal, we have one of our favorites, Who's Our Home. This is also the one where I wanted to give Carly's fingers a workout. So please stand as you're willing and able.
Far away from
And it's interesting, I never realized, as with so many of our hymns, that the actual tune was taken from a Christian hymn of some sort. Huh?
Very, very old tune, and it's used for a lot of different hymns.
Yeah, and I actually was looking at something somewhere and it's like, oh, okay, it was, I think it was being sung in a cathedral or chapel someplace in England. It was like, wow. Okay.
Many hymnals use in the same hymnal, that tune is used 3 or 4 times, yeah, so.
We have a many right now.
Yeah, we actually, yeah, 207, it's 207.
Okay, well, there you go. All right. We extinguish this flame, but not political wisdom. We want the community. Our friends. These we carry in our hearts and in our hands until we are together again. And the closing words are from a well-known Unitarian minister, who I encountered many years ago, Mark Valentini. And it is number 686, and he says, "Go in peace." This is appropriate. Live simply, gently at home in yourselves. Act justly, speak justly. Remember the depth of your own compassion. Forget not your power in the days of your powerlessness. Do not desire to be wealthier than your peers, and extend not your hand to charity. Practice forbearance. Speak the truth or speak not. Take care of yourselves as bodies, for you are a good gift. Crave peace for all people in the world, beginning with yourself, and it should go with the dream of that peace alive in your heart. So take that, cynics. Thank you for coming. We now have a variety of luscious desserts. Blessed be, amen, shalom, namaste, may it be so.
And we are setting up a sharing circle, so feel free to get your refreshments. If you're ready to share, come on in. You can bring your refreshments